The verse of the day and the first verse for the February challenge is Proverbs 9:10, and it says, "Fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment." To give a little overview on Proverbs, Proverbs was written by a man named Solomon, and Solomon was the son of King David, and King David is known as one of the most influential kings in the Bible. He is known as the man who was after God's heart. Solomon, because he was the wisest man to ever live, this was a gift God gave Solomon to be wise. He wrote this book, and so the book of Proverbs is all about wisdom. It identifies the difference between knowledge and wisdom. It's good to have knowledge. Knowledge helps you pass tests, but wisdom helps you make good decisions in life and take the knowledge in a way that's in alignment with God's will and in a way that will benefit you. I don't remember where I learned this, but someone once said, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing that you don't put a tomato in a fruit salad. So it's having an understanding of what something is. That's knowledge. Wisdom is applying it in a way that's wisdom. In the beginning summary in my Bible for Proverbs, my Bible is the NLT version, it says that these proverbs help the reader to distinguish between two paths, the way of the wise and the way of the fool. So if fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and being a fool is the opposite of wisdom, then being a fool in this context is someone who isn't fearing God, because in order to be wise, it's fearing God. So the opposite of that is probably someone who does not fear God. I love Proverbs because they're like one-liner, like zingers of wisdom that we can easily apply to our life. So I'm super excited to go through all of these, and they apply to tons of different categories in our life. And today's verse in particular, I think is a perfect one to start with, because in order to grasp wisdom, which is this book, the book of Proverbs is wisdom, you need to fear the Lord. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. What's fear of the Lord? That can sound like a scary thing. I don't want to have this fear. I thought fear wasn't good. But fear is just a reverence and an awe. Like having a deep respect for someone, knowing who someone is in your life and honoring that. And so when it comes to fear of the Lord, it's more of a heart posture of, I know God has to be first, because when He's first, everything else goes well for me. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to go well because you're pursuing protection and love and relationship with the one who created you. So step one, in order to understand this book, we need fear of the Lord. How do we have fear of the Lord? Putting God first. How do we put God first? Developing a relationship with Him, something like the Jesus Challenge, spending daily time with Him. Putting Him first in every area of our life looks like His greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And what does that look like? Honoring the Lord with your thoughts, actions, beliefs, what you do, how you love people. It's having your entire life, your entire being reflect the nature of God, the character of God. And then you might be like, okay, well, what's the character of God? What's the fruit of the Holy Spirit? Galatians 5:22. The fruit of the Spirit is peace, love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those things are the reflection of God's heart. And that is the fruit that we start to bear the more we develop relationship and the more we fear God. One of my greatest prayers is, Lord, help me to fear you over man. Demonstrating fear of God in your everyday life looks like caring about God's opinion over anyone else's. That's fearing God over man. And that's not easy, because not caring what people think is not an easy thing. But learning how to fear God in every area of our life looks like not caring what people think, only caring what God says, only caring about what His Word says about us. Fearing God over man and culture looks like following what His Word says over what culture tells you to do. So we live in a very sexual culture where they say sleep around, but God says wait till marriage. Fearing God over man looks like not giving into culture. It looks like waiting till marriage and honoring the way God calls you to live. And it's so interesting, the more you pursue fear of God, the more you get the wisdom as to why God says what He says. Fear of God looks like being aware of the parts of you that fall short and where you need God's power to be made strong in you. Looks like knowing when you're being judgmental and be like, Lord, renew my mind. Help me to love people the way you do. Looks like being aware when you're jealous or holding unforgiveness Seeking God to help you forgive looks like fearing Him over choosing your feelings. Another way to say today's verse, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, is to say wisdom starts with right relationship with God. And how do we have right relationship with God? Believing in the one He sent, Jesus. Believing in Jesus gives you right relationship with God because that gives you access to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit means you have a part of God's Spirit, God's heart now living within you, which gives you power over sin, which means now God doesn't see you as your sin because you have the power necessary to overcome it if you pursue His heart on a daily basis. You have to remember, it doesn't say wisdom begins with perfect relationship with God. It begins with right relationship. And right relationship simply looks like faith, believing in the one He sent. And then it's in relationship, building relationship, that you learn how to be more obedient every day. And again, obedience is simply you protecting yourself from falling away from God. And when you fall away from God, you fall away from love. You fall away from the power necessary to overcome evil when it comes your way, to overcome lies when the devil tries to feed you them. Staying in connection with God and looking more like His fruit, peace, love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, looks like being obedient. But again, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect in that obedience. The more you walk with God, the more God shows you how, and the more God reveals wisdom, because fear of God is just a heart posture. It's a decision to say, Lord, I want to put you first. And from there, God teaches you wisdom for how to follow Him well. I share this all the time, but I think it's worth repeating. God speaks to me a lot in acronyms, as you can tell. The Jesus Challenge. He gave me the acronym for how to do anything in life. And it applies to today's verse because I ask myself, how, Lord, do I do this? How, Lord, does this come to pass? I have this dream. How do I do this? How do I follow you well? And He said, how is humility, obedience, wisdom. Start with humility. Humility is a version of fearing God, knowing your need for God, putting Him first. Humility leads to obedience because when you know that you need God, you start to understand how He calls you to live, and He gives you the power necessary to change the way you live and to change your habits and to be more obedient. And that obedience births wisdom. I think for me personally, I had to learn some things the hard way. So when it comes to me now putting God first, learning how to be obedient, I see the wisdom so much more now because I know the pain that it caused me when I wasn't obedient, which is the coolest part about being obedient and learning that true obedience really is just true freedom. It's staying in alignment with true love, which disarms everything that isn't love. If you're doing this challenge, this is a perfect step to fearing God and putting Him first. And I'm so proud of you. Happy day one. I hope you guys have a great experience and that God is already moving in your heart. And we'll see you tomorrow. Okay?